Behind the velvet ropes and golden records, the king of rock and roll was haunted by a different kind of heartbreak hotel. While millions of women screamed his name, the ones who whispered it in his ear carried secrets that could destroy him. From the teenage beauty who sold his love letters to the highest bidder, to the starlet who recorded their most intimate moments, to the mystery woman who may have caused his death, this is the untold story of how Elvis Presley's greatest weakness wasn't pills or fame, but his desperate need to believe in true love. In a world where everything was for sale, even the king's heart had a price tag. Anne Margaret's laughter echoed through the Flamingo Hotel suite as she carefully placed the small recording device back into her purse. The red light had been blinking for the past hour, capturing every word Elvis had whispered about his fears, his dreams, and most dangerously, his business dealings. To the world, she was Hollywood royalty, having a torrid affair with the king. To the men who paid her bills, she was something far more valuable, a professional collector of secrets. "You're so tense, baby," she purred, running her fingers through Elvis's jet-black hair. "Tell me what's really bothering you." Elvis lay sprawled across the silk sheets, vulnerable in the afterglow of their passion. This was when he was most honest, most open, and most useful to her employers. The Hollywood executives who'd given Anne Margaret her break hadn't done it out of kindness. They'd invested in her beauty, her talent, and most importantly, her willingness to extract information from the men who could make or break careers. "It's the Colonel," Elvis murmured, his guard completely down. "I'm starting to think he's been lying about the movie contracts. Some of the numbers don't add up." Anne Margaret's pulse quickened. This was exactly what her handlers wanted to hear. Discord between Elvis and Colonel Parker, weakness in the most powerful partnership in entertainment. She pressed closer, her voice honey-sweet with manufactured concern. "What kind of numbers, darling?" As Elvis detailed his suspicions about inflated percentages and hidden fees, Anne Margaret memorized every word. Her photographic memory, trained through years of learning scripts, now served a different master. Every confession would be transcribed, analyzed, and weaponized by men who saw Elvis not as a person, but as a threat to their own empires. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Elvis sang about tender love to millions, she was tender with his heart only to break it more completely. Every kiss was calculated, every caress designed to lower his defenses further. "You know what you need?" she whispered against his ear. "You need someone who understands the business. Someone who could look at those contracts for you." Elvis turned to face her, his blue eyes filled with trust that made her stomach clench with something dangerously close to guilt. "Would you do that for me?" "Of course, baby. I'd do anything for you." The lie came so easily it frightened her. But lies were currency in Hollywood, and Anne Margaret had been spending them since she was 17. The naive Swedish girl who dreamed of stardom had died years ago, replaced by someone who understood that survival required sacrifice, even if the sacrifice was someone else's heart. Later, as Elvis slept beside her, Anne Margaret stared at the ceiling and wondered when she'd become this person. When had she started seeing love as leverage, intimacy as intelligence gathering? When had she learned to fake tears on command and time her sighs for maximum emotional impact? Her phone buzzed. Quietly, a text from her contact. Package received. Very interested in the Parker material. Bonus payment approved. Anne Margaret deleted the message and slipped from the bed. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection, still beautiful, still desirable, still deadly. Elvis trusted her because he needed to believe in love, needed to believe that someone could want him for more than his fame or fortune. But as she looked at herself in the harsh fluorescent light, Anne Margaret realized the cruelest truth of all. She'd stopped believing in love the moment she'd learned to profit from it. And tomorrow, she'd break another piece of Elvis's heart with the same smile she'd used to steal it. The king of rock and roll was just another mark, and she was very, very good at her job. Linda Thompson clutched the leather portfolio against her chest as she walked through the shadowy corridors of the National Enquirer offices. Inside were photographs that could destroy Elvis Presley intimate moments captured during their 5-year relationship, images that revealed not just his body, but his soul at its most vulnerable. The weight of betrayal felt heavier than the portfolio itself. Miss Thompson, right on time. The editor's voice was oily with satisfaction as he gestured toward the conference table covered in preliminary layouts. These are exactly what our readers want to see. Linda's eyes swept across the spreads. Elvis exposed. The secret life behind closed doors. The King's addiction. Shocking photos reveal the truth. Love gone wrong. Linda tells all about Elvis's dark side. Each headline was a knife to the heart of the man who'd once promised to marry her, who'd shared his deepest fears in the sanctuary of Graceland's master bedroom. The man who'd never suspected that the camera he'd bought her as a gift would become the instrument of his humiliation. The photos of him with the pills are particularly compelling, the editor continued, pointing to shots of Elvis in various states of pharmaceutical haze. Our medical expert says they clearly show someone in the grip of serious addiction. Linda stared at the images she'd taken in moments of supposed intimacy. Elvis asleep with prescription bottles scattered around him. Elvis stumbling through Graceland's hallways at 3 a.m. Elvis crying in their bedroom. After a particularly brutal review of his latest movie, she told herself she was documenting their love story, creating memories they could look back on together. But deep down, even then, she'd known these photographs were insurance proof of their relationship that could be converted to cash when the fairy tale inevitably ended. The payment we discussed ... Linda's voice was barely above a whisper. $2 million as agreed, plus a percentage of international sales. The editor slid a contract across the table. All we need is your signature and exclusive rights to your story. $2 million. Enough to buy her freedom, her independence, her future. Enough to never again be dependent on a man's whims or generosity. But as she looked at Elvis's sleeping face in one of the photographs, innocent and peaceful, she felt something she hadn't expected. Shame. There's one more thing, the editor said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We need you to go on record about the drugs. Medical professionals will testify, but a first-hand account from someone who lived with him. You want me to say he's an addict. You want to tell the truth. These photos already tell the story. We just need you to provide context. Linda's hand hovered over the contract. 5 years of her life with Elvis. 5 years of genuine moments mixed with calculated documentation. She'd loved him, truly loved him, but she'd also prepared for this day from the moment she'd realized their relationship was more prison than paradise. Elvis's jealousy had been suffocating. His need for control absolute. His promises of marriage, always delayed, always conditional. She'd given him her youth, her beauty, her devotion, and in return, he'd given her expensive gifts and emotional uncertainty. What happens after this publishes? She asked. You become the woman who told the world the truth about Elvis Presley. You write books, do interviews, lecture circuits. This is just the beginning of your own career, her own career, built on the corpse of Elvis's reputation, but hers nonetheless. Linda thought about all the nights she'd lain awake, wondering if she was wasting her life as arm candy for a man who'd never fully commit to her. This was her exit strategy, her nuclear option, her path to independence. She signed the contract. With steady hands, each letter of her name another nail in Elvis's coffin of trust. As she walked out of the building into the harsh Los Angeles sunshine, Linda Thompson felt lighter than she had in years. Behind her, editors were already preparing the story that would rock the world. Ahead of her, a new life beckoned, one where she was the star instead of the supporting player. She'd learned the most important lesson Hollywood had to teach. Everyone's loyalty has a price, and everyone's love has an expiration date. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The photographs would hit newsstands in 3 days. By then, Linda would be untouchable, and Elvis would discover that the woman he'd trusted with his most vulnerable moments had been playing the longest game of all. June Juanico slipped through the servants' entrance of Graceland at 2:17 a.m., her press credentials hidden beneath a black coat that made her nearly invisible in the Memphis darkness. To Elvis, she was a sweet hometown girl who'd captured his heart during their brief but intense courtship. To the team of private investigators who'd recruited her, she was Asset J47, their most valuable source inside the king's inner circle. The recording device strapped to her thigh felt cold against her skin as she made her way through familiar hallways toward Elvis's private study. She'd been coming to Graceland for months now, playing the role of the devoted ex-girlfriend who couldn't quite let go. Elvis, lonely and nostalgic, had welcomed her back into his life with open arms, never suspecting that every tender moment was being documented, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidder. Her employers represented a consortium of interests, rival record labels wanting insider information about Elvis's upcoming releases, government agencies curious about his ties to organized crime figures, and most lucratively, divorce attorneys looking for ammunition in the inevitable legal battles that surrounded rock royalty. "You're late," came a voice from the shadows of the study. June's heart hammered as she spun around, expecting to see Elvis. Instead, she found herself facing Red West, one of the Memphis Mafia's most loyal soldiers. His expression was unreadable. In the dim light, "I couldn't sleep," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I was looking for Elvis. He's not here." Red stepped closer, his massive frame blocking her exit. "But maybe you can help me with something. We've been having some security issues lately. Information leaking out that should stay private." June's mouth went dry. The recording device suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds, its presence burning against her leg like a brand of guilt. "I don't know anything about that," she whispered. "Course not. But see, the thing is, we've been doing some investigating of our own." Red pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "Turns out our sweet little June isn't just a secretary at the Memphis Commercial Appeal. She's got some interesting connections to people who ask a lot of questions about Elvis." The folder hit the desk with a thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Photographs spilled out. June entering the offices of Lebowitz and Associates. June meeting with men in expensive suits at anonymous coffee shops. June depositing checks that far exceeded her newspaper salary. $25,000 last month alone. Red continued, his voice conversational, but his eyes deadly serious. "That's a lot of money for a girl who supposedly makes $50 a week writing obituaries." June's cover story crumbled. Like sand, every carefully constructed lie, every manufactured moment of nostalgia, every calculated display of lingering affection, all of it exposed under Red's knowing gaze. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "We've known for 6 weeks. Been feeding you false information to see where it would turn up. Amazing how quickly your little scoops made it into competitors' hands." The room spun as June realized the magnitude of her situation. If Elvis's people had been watching her for 6 weeks, they knew everything. They knew about the recording device, the planted questions, the stolen photographs. They probably knew about her handlers, her real employers, her entire network of deception. What happens now? She managed to ask. Red's smile was cold as a Memphis winter. Now you're going to make a choice. You can keep working for your friends in the expensive suits, and we'll make sure everyone in Memphis knows exactly what kind of person June Juanico really is. Your newspaper job, your reputation, your family's good name all gone. Or you start working for us. You feed your handlers exactly what we want them to know, when we want them to know it. You become our asset instead of theirs. The irony was suffocating. She'd thought she was using Elvis, manipulating his feelings for personal gain. But Elvis's people had been manipulating her manipulation, turning her betrayal against her own employers. She was a spy who'd been counter-spied, a deceiver who'd been out-deceived. Elvis doesn't know, does he? She asked. Red's expression softened slightly, the first genuine emotion he'd shown. The boss still believes you came back because you love him. And that's how it's going to stay, as long as you make the smart choice. June looked at the photographs scattered across the desk, evidence of her treachery, proof of her betrayal. But also, unexpectedly, a path to redemption. She could continue to betray Elvis to his enemies, or she could betray his enemies to him. What do you need me to do? Red's smile returned, warmer this time. Welcome to the Memphis Mafia, June. Now, let's talk about what you're going to tell your handlers about Elvis's next album. Outside, dawn was breaking over Graceland, but for June Juanico, the real darkness was just beginning. Ginger Alden's hands trembled as she crushed the pills into Elvis's morning orange juice, watching the white powder dissolve like snow in sunshine. The prescription bottle, or her own name anxiety medication, her doctor had given her months ago, but the pills inside were something far more deadly. Something provided by the men who'd promised her $1 million and a movie career if she could ensure Elvis Presley never made it to his 43rd birthday. Morning, honey, Elvis's voice was thick with sleep as he shuffled into the Graceland kitchen, his silk pajamas wrinkled, his famous hair disheveled. At 42, he still possessed traces of the beauty that had made him the most famous man in the world. But years of prescription abuse and heartbreak had carved deep lines around his eyes. I made your juice fresh, Ginger said, forcing brightness into her voice as she handed him the glass. And I called Dr. Nick about those new vitamins you wanted. Elvis drank deeply, trusting completely. He'd been so grateful when Ginger had entered his life young, beautiful, seemingly untainted by the corruption that surrounded his world. She was his last hope for genuine love, his final attempt at finding someone who wanted him for more than his fame or fortune. If only he knew that she'd been recruited before they'd even met. Carefully selected and positioned in his path like a landmine disguised as a flower, the organization that employed Ginger remained faceless to her anonymous voices on phones, envelopes of cash left in predetermined locations, instructions delivered through intermediaries who knew only fragments of the larger plan. She suspected they represented competing entertainment interests, possibly even government agencies, concerned about Elvis's growing political influence. But she'd learned not to ask questions. I've been thinking, Elvis said, settling into his chair at the breakfast table. Maybe we should take a trip, get away from all this madness. What do you think about Hawaii? Ginger felt tears prick her eyes as she watched him plan a future he wouldn't live to see. The irony was crushing. Elvis's faith in her love was genuine, his desire to build a life with her real, his trust in her absolute. He was falling in love with his own executioner, and he was smiling while he did it. That sounds wonderful, she whispered. Over the past 6 months, Ginger had become an expert in Elvis's routines, his weaknesses, his medical dependencies. She knew exactly when he was most vulnerable, which combinations of medications were most dangerous, how to escalate his existing addictions without raising suspicion. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. No dramatic poisoning, no obvious murder. Instead, a gradual escalation of his existing problems until his body simply couldn't take anymore. An accidental overdose that would surprise no one who knew about his prescription habits. You know what I love about you, Ginger? Elvis reached across the table to take her hand, his blue eyes soft with genuine affection. You're the first woman in years who seems to want me just for me, not for what I can give you or what you can get from me." The irony was so sharp it physically hurt. Ginger was being paid more for her deception than Elvis had paid any woman for her love. She was the ultimate transaction disguised as romance, a final betrayal wrapped in wedding dress dreams. Her phone buzzed discreetly. Text message. Timeline accelerated. Completion required within 72 hours. Final payment ready. 72 hours. 3 days to end the life of the man who'd started talking about marriage, who'd shown her pictures of engagement rings, who'd confided his dream of becoming a father again. "Elvis," she heard herself say, "I need to tell you something." For a moment, she tottered on the edge of confession. The money, the movie promises, the threats, all of it felt suddenly meaningless compared to the trust shining in his eyes. But then she remembered her sister's medical bills, her mother's mortgage, her own desperate need to escape a life of poverty and obscurity. "I love you," she said instead, and realized with horror that it wasn't entirely a lie anymore. Elvis's smile could have lit up Las Vegas. "I love you too, baby, more than I've ever loved anyone." As she watched him finish his orange juice, Ginger calculated dosages and timing, entry points and exit strategies. In 72 hours, Elvis Presley would be dead, and she would be rich. She would also be the woman who'd killed the king of rock and roll with a kiss. The ultimate betrayal was almost complete, and the most tragic part was that neither of them fully understood how real their feelings had become in the midst of the deception. Love and death were about to dance their final waltz at Graceland, and only one of them would survive the music. The women who loved Elvis Presley or claimed to took pieces of him with them when they left. Some sold those pieces to tabloids, others to rival studios, and a few to forces that remain unnamed to this day. Each relationship became a transaction, each intimate moment a commodity to be traded in the marketplace of celebrity destruction. Perhaps the greatest tragedy wasn't that Elvis died young, but that he never lived to see authentic love. Every woman who claimed to cherish him had learned to weaponize affection, to package intimacy as intelligence, to transform tenderness into a tool of betrayal. In the end, the king of rock and roll died as he had lived in his final years, surrounded by people who profited from his pain, loved by millions who didn't know him, and betrayed by the few who did. The real mystery isn't how Elvis died, but whether he ever truly lived, or if his entire adult life was just an elaborate performance staged by those who understood that even the king's heart could be bought and sold. Want to discover more hidden truths about the icons who shaped our culture? Join our exclusive community of truth seekers for access to untold stories, rare evidence, and the real history behind the headlines. The secrets they tried to bury are waiting to be uncovered.